Let's continue along and get to our deadline countdown for today. It's the all-in clubs in both the East and the West. And let's start with with the Western Conference, Matt, where listen, I took this and I looked at all in, and I wanted to give, for at least my list, teams who I think should be all in, but also have the ability to. So I looked at teams like Edmonton and Colorado. And, if Landeskog's out, we know Evander Kane's out. They have the LTIR space if they want to use it, but neither of them really have the A-plus assets you'd need to go get a big fish. Edmonton doesn't have their first round pick this year. Neither does Colorado. A team like Vegas doesn't have their first round pick this year, although when has that ever stopped them? They always seem to find some way to get deals done if they want to. I looked at a team like Winnipeg, who has a pretty clear-cut need, but they went pretty all in last year, so I left them off. I basically walked my way into only the Dallas Stars. And listen, they have the LTIR space if they want to because of the Tyler Seguin injury. On top of that, Jim Nill's done a great job of holding on to assets. He basically never trades first-round picks. He's got each of his first-rounders for the next 3 drafts. You could look at Maverick Bourque, and you could look at Logan Stankoven as great pieces, young pieces on his roster. But then I think you could also look and say, all right, Lion Bichelle, that would probably be pretty enticing to a team that's selling at the deadline. You have young players on your roster. I think they should be moving on from first and prospects. I had Dallas as my lone all-in club in the West. Your list was a little longer.
Yeah, it's a little different. And I approached it slightly differently philosophically. I was thinking less about the assets to get a deal done and more about where they are in their window. So for the Dallas Stars, I didn't put them on my all-in list because I think they're still set up to contend for years to come. So when you're a relatively conservative GM like Jim Nill, yes, you have the LTIR space from Seguin, but it's not like, oh my God, we need to go deep. We have to win the Stanley Cup this year or my job's in jeopardy. We know that team is set up because they've got wave after wave of young talent coming in. Stankoven, like you said, Maverick Bourque. You still got guys like Jason Robertson, Miro Heiskanen, Rupe Hintz, all in their prime. Jake Ottinger. So they're going to be great for years to come. Whereas Colorado, for me, I look at a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I think Colorado is becoming what Tampa Bay was a couple years ago. In your life cycle, you have your superstars, you win your Stanley Cup or Cups if you're Tampa Bay, then you start to peak. Your superstars get to their late 20s, and you start to enter a window where you're competitive, but you're not in the top tier contenders anymore. Colorado has Mikko Rantanen to re-sign. That's going to be a monster cap hit next year. So I think this is the year you got to take your swing. We know that Chris McFarland, he's really aggressive. He made the Mackenzie Blackwood trade. And if you look at the Winnipeg Jets, I think they've surprised all of us by being good again this year. They still have good prospect assets and picks. They can still make a move. And to me, the Jets, kind of like Colorado, you look at Scheifele, Hellebuck, Morrissey, Kyle Connor, all these guys are in their late prime. So you have to take your shot. You're in a window again. Nikolai Ehlers is a pending UFA, so you don't know where he's going to go next year. That's why I have him. And Edmonton, Tyler, I mean, you can offer your input as an Edmonton guy. I think you could argue they already have what they need to win the Stanley Cup, but I still think they're so close. You have to do whatever it takes to get over that hump. Maybe it's just adding depth on the right side of your defense. I don't know.
Yeah, and I do think they'll add some amount of depth. Like, that wasn't me saying any of those teams are just going to sit on their hands, but I don't see Edmonton doing an Ekholm style deal where it's a first and it's your top prospect, or at least another former first like they did with Ekholm. I don't think they have the pieces to make that work. And another thing too, like McDowell says here, Edmonton's all in with Draisaitl and McDavid on reasonable contracts. Leon Draisaitl's contract's going to shoot up, and let's say the cap's at $97 million, like some people are speculating next season, it's 14% of the cap. Draisaitl, when his deal first kicked in, was 11% of the cap. Like, that's not a massive, massive swing. And you could look at this and kind of go two ways. Edmonton's all in with McDavid and Draisaitl on reasonable contracts, or you could say, hey, Leon's extended. Connor's probably going to be extended very early in the summer. They have him for the next 8-9 years. Maybe there is less urgency. Maybe you look at a Pittsburgh and go, you know what? We don't want this to age as poorly as that did. Granted, you don't have the Stanleys to kind of go with it, but maybe Edmonton's saying we actually want to keep this window open for more than just 1 or 2 years. Also, Stan Bowman's secure. He's new in that job. It's his first season. If there's ever a year where maybe you could, in quote, get away with not pushing all the chips into the middle, it might be this one in Edmonton, but that's probably enough Oilers talk for this audience. Let's move along to the East, where I did have a longer list, teams that kind of check both boxes of my criteria. I had Washington. This is the last year where they got those 2 goalies on bargain contracts. And if you're only spending $2.5 million on your goaltending and you have a ton of draft picks and assets, which they do, Washington should recognize what's in front of them and add to this team. Carolina has clear needs, the ability to go address them. New Jersey, I had in the same boat. We know what they need. They have a clear surplus on the right side of their blue line in a complicated trade market. To have an NHL-ready surplus at such an important position, you can do damage. And then I had Ottawa, and you had Ottawa too, and I love that we both have them here. They are not a Stanley Cup contender, not a traditional all-in team in the sense of go and get those finishing pieces, but you have an opportunity to make the playoffs. You need to, if you're Steve Staios, show this young core that you are serious about competing.
I'm with you. And to address Ottawa first, you got to show your young core what it's like to play in the playoffs. Brady Tkachuk, Jake Sanderson, Drake Matheson, none of these guys have seen a single playoff game. You can't be 7 years into Brady Tkachuk's career with no playoff games. It's a crime for the fans, too. This guy is built for wars in the playoffs. To not have him out there, I just hate that we haven't gotten to witness playoff Brady Tkachuk. And I think you have to take your shot. 2017, that double overtime loss to Pittsburgh, 1 goal away from the Stanley Cup final. This team has not been back since then. So Ottawa, you got to take your swing. I'm with you on Washington. I do think they should be a little more cautious, at least with their current prospects. They're kind of reloading on the fly. They're competitive, but guys like Ryan Leonard, Andrew Crystal, this team's getting good in terms of the pipeline. I don't think you want to give those guys away. Maybe picks. The Leafs, it's all about Mitch Marner. You don't know what the team's going to look like next year. You got to shoot your shot right now because of that uncertainty. And Carolina, you're now in 7 seasons of Rod Brind'Amour, a 600 hockey team or better, 6 of those seasons. And I think they need a game breaker at forward. They basically have to search for the equivalent of the Jake Gensel deal last year.
There's going to be more takes like this one or on Saturday, I should say, because it is the deadline countdown article and it's a full-on roundtable. So you can look for that over at dailyfaceoff.com. Also, Frank Saravalli is going to have an updated trade targets dropping that we'll discuss tomorrow.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.